And now for more on the fire, we're joined now by a coordinator of the Marshalltown Fire Justice Campaign on the spate of Johannesburg fires in the inner city. A very good evening to you, Mr. Mametlwe Sebei. Can you just tell us what you've gleaned from information that has been given about this latest fire?
It is that, 2 people died. 4 injured after the fire gutted a building, in one of the, which is one of the many buildings in Johannesburg that are in complete state of dilapidation and degradation, so-called hijacked buildings, but which I think, says a lot about the state of public infrastructure in the city of Johannesburg, including many residential buildings where many poor working class people are condemned to seek refuge in a context of a housing crisis that has left over 500,000 households without any decent housing and living in informal settlement and on the so-called waiting list.
And we're told that there were shack-like structures within the building. Are you able to expand a little bit more on what this actually means?
There is about 224 of these buildings in the inner city, which are, as I said, in complete state of degradation. I mean, the conditions in those buildings are horrific. It is not the type of conditions you wish even to put your pet in. I mean, there is no any form of amenities. There is no, a proper provision of water, of electricity, of rubbish collection, let alone the state of maintenance and repair of the buildings. So it's complete neglect on the part of the city, but also some of the private owners that actually these buildings belong to. And I think, for me, it speaks to what has been happening in the city of Johannesburg, where there has not been any investment in upgrading of these facilities. This is the reason I'm saying that according to the city's own report, there's 224 of the so-called hijacked buildings, which I think speak to a level of criminal neglect by successive administration of the city. In their failure to maintain these buildings, they have allowed their officials to collaborate with organized criminal elements who have hijacked these buildings to extort money from the poor, disparate people who are seeking accommodation for a rental over the property which actually belong to the city, but also for a provision of services by illegal means. Now, we have said that the city must expropriate and reclaim these buildings, upgrade them so that they provide a decent accommodation and housing, but also we have said that the city need to embark on a public housing program to ensure that not only are we upgrading these buildings, but we provide, we build sufficient number of homes for 500,000 households that are on the waiting list in the city of Johannesburg. But indeed, we need to overcome the housing crisis in the whole country. 13% of South Africans are living in so-called informal settlements. The housing situation and the housing crisis is not getting better. If anything, it's getting worse. In 1994, when the ANC took over, it was estimated as at a backlog of 1.5 million. Today, that backlog stands at staggering 3.7 million housing units. That, of course, speaks to the failure of the neoliberal austerity program of the ANC that has resulted on cuts on spending on housing. But I also think that it speaks to the failure of the model of outsourcing and, of course, a tendering for construction of these houses. But I also think that the current situation in Johannesburg, right, and the fires that have created so many tragedies, not less this one, but also the one at Marshalltown, is also about the state of emergency services. And I think we know in 2022, the DA administration announced spending of 178 million rands on, procurement of firefighting engines, on water cannons and other vehicles to equip their emergency services. 2 years down the line, not only is it that there is not enough of these firefighting services, that we see, buildings being gathered completely when there could be a rapid response.
Okay.
But the capacity is getting worse. it is said that only half of the firefighting agents are working. And I think this, again, is an indictment on the neglect of the elite of the.
All right, let's get into what you are doing as an organization, because I believe this is what you've also joined us to tell us about, that you have a campaign that is underway to help bring an end to the spectre.
We are calling for a rolling mass actions. You would know that in October we had mass demonstration involving about thousands of working class activists from community civics in the inner city of Johannesburg, in many townships, in many informal settlements, but also from the trade union movement and youth movements across the whole city of Johannesburg, united against the scapegoating of migrants, against the bashing of the victims, demanding upgrading of all the of these buildings in the inner city of Johannesburg, demanding for a mass public housing program, demanding for the justice, the compensation, but also assistance and support for the victims of that Marshalltown fire to ensure that they are able to rebuild their lives. So we are going to be intensifying and escalating that action in the next coming days. In the past few weeks, we've been focused on organizing a relief for the victims of the Marshalltown fire after the floods at Denver. But we are back and saying we need to get back to the street, and we want to build a movement that would result and culminate in a complete shutdown of Johannesburg to force the attention of the political establishment on these issues.
Okay.
We do believe
so that's the political aspect of it, but what about engaging communities? You as an organization, what are you doing? Because I believe that you are trying to teach people about how to avoid fires in these buildings, because as you say, there are problems. I want to understand what you're hoping to do as an intervention, as an organization.
We, as I've said, we have been organizing relief. We have been busy in the past few days organizing, food for the victims of floods at Denver, where the victims of the Marshalltown fire experienced another tragedy upon that tragedy, and in this case, it was flooding. We have been mobilizing for donations for school shoes, school uniforms, because many people lost those documentation. We are also trying to pressure the city to ensure that they support the victims of that fire to rebuild, their lives. But here's the thing: we are saying, ultimately, we've got to find sustainable solution to this problem. And what is the solution? First and foremost, there's got to be an effort to ensure that those buildings in the inner city are safe. And part of it is that they need to be equipped with fire extinguishers. We also need to equip and recapitalize the city of Johannesburg emergency services. We need to know what happened to that close to 200 million that was supposed to be spent. And when the tender was awarded, I think it was much firefighting technology or something like that, one of those companies. What happened to that money? Because the state of the emergency services is appalling. It's simply inadequate in a city where the emergency services are receiving 25,000 calls a year to attend to this situation. That is only 13 to 15 firefighting engines, about 2 to 3 water cannons that are working. For me, speak to negligence that is criminal.
All right, unfortunately,
we need to be able to say, how to upgrade these buildings? How do we build decent houses that are going to be safe and adequate, provide the kind of accommodation that is compatible with ideal.
Unfortunately, we have run out of time. Mametlwe Sebei of the Marshalltown Fire Justice Campaign.